Well, good morning. If you have a Bible, I invite you to open with me to 2 Timothy chapter 2. We want to talk today about being faithful to the end. Being faithful to the end. It's an honor to be here on your campus and to speak to you guys today. I love college students for a number of reasons. One of those is that you're in a very pivotal point in your life, discerning what you're going to do with your life, who you're going to marry, what you believe, and all of these things, and those are very important subjects. And the other reason is my life was changed in college personally about 12 years ago. Is really where my Christian journey began. I'd like to share with you a bit of that journey and let that sort of segue into our studies this morning on faithfulness. I was born in Detroit, Michigan, and still remain a huge Detroit Tiger baseball fan. And my parents moved, me and my sister, the family, to Kentucky when I was very small. And I began asking the question, what is life about? At a very young age. I remember in kindergarten, I think was the first time I began to ask this question. And I really thought life was about being like the Fonzie on television. Fonzie was my favorite guy on TV. I had a little Fonzie cycle. And I remember my mother taking me to kindergarten, dropping me off and crying because I had to leave my Fonzie cycle at home. And you get older, you get a little more mature, you get a little better worldview, and you begin to develop some real passions in life. And I remember as a third grader, I wanted to be a professional wrestler, that great contribution to American society. I believed that this was what I was cut out to do, and so every Friday, after we had our lunch and were very hyper after that square pizza and chocolate milk, we would wrestle. And my sister actually participated by making the cardboard wrestling belts and put glitter on them. And on one particular occasion, I was fighting my opponent, and he kicked a pencil up my throat and cut part of my tonsil out. And it ended my wrestling career. And so I decided I needed something else to do in my life. And so as a seventh grader, much more mature now, I really believed that my goal in life, my passion in life, my purpose in life was to be a rap star. And so I convinced my teacher, Mrs. Elliott, every Friday that art class, which is what we were in, was really a subset of art, was rap. And so every Friday, my boy Danny would flow and I would go. He would lay down the beat and I would make it speak, which is just sort of what we did every Friday. And I discovered, I liked this music and this hip hop style, but and rap music, but my audience was not very receptive. I was in Kentucky at the time. And they couldn't listen that fast. And so I really thought, I need a better audience. And so the only thing that really remained consistent in my life was sports. I was a big basketball, not a big basketball player, a little basketball player who loved basketball and baseball. And I actually went to a school called the University of the Cumberlands in Kentucky. And I played baseball there for 4 years, started every game at shortstop. But I only hold one career record, most walks in a career. A patient guy, and it's very impressive. Anyway, I go to college, and here I am now just trying to discover what life is about. I was not a Christian. This was about 12 years ago now. I remember going away to college, and my mother gave me a Bible. She said, "Son, you need to take this with you." And I'm like, "What for?" And she was like, "Well, you might read it one day." And so I said, "Okay." So I took my Bible with me, and I went through my first year of college. I had a stellar 1.7 GPA. And was not really knocking it out of the park academically. And I really was doing two things. I was playing a lot of baseball and I was partying a lot. And there was this guy on our team named Stephen, who was our second baseman, who was a preacher's kid. And this kid was crazy. He was a second baseman. I was a shortstop. We were weightlifting partners, batting practice partners. And he relentlessly witnessed to me. He would come over to my house on Sunday morning in my dorm, and he would just literally pound on my door for 30 minutes to get me out of the bed to go to church with him. And I remember going to church with him, and he would take out his Bible. He had one of those huge study Bibles, had little rolling wheels on it, and he would pull it out, and I just could not believe he could actually understand. He understood what the guy was talking about. He's taking notes. And I'm just sort of peeking over his shoulder, and I was like, I need to get one of those study Bibles. It's got all the answers in the bottom of it. That would be really great. And Stephen just witnessed to me all the time. He would witness to guys on second base. When they would get around to second base, sometimes they would go for 3 because they didn't want to talk to this guy. He was really a nut. And so I'm a sophomore now. My life was really spiraling downward. And the only person that I really opened up to and trusted was Stephen. And he invited me to go to an FCA service, Fellowship of Christian Athletes. And so it's a Thursday night. It's just a typical Thursday, nothing special about it. And I've been to FCA one time before, and the only time I went, I got in a fight. And I had never been around a youth group. I didn't grow up in a youth group. And I went to this meeting, and they started hugging people all over the place, you know. And I had a girlfriend, and I thought this guy hugged my girl excessively long. And so we got in a scrap at FCA. And so Stephen's, all right, Tony, you can't fight at FCA. Okay, it's not fighting Christian athletes, it's fellowship Christian athletes. All right, I later discovered that was the Southern Baptists. That's what they do well. But anyway, I go to this meeting, right? And this guy gets up to speak, and it was like Jesus was speaking directly to me. I heard the gospel in its fullness, and Stephen came over to me at the end of this service, and he said, Tony, do you want to surrender your life to Jesus? I said, yeah. And we gathered up around these steps. It was about 4 other teammates. We got on our knees, and I just confessed my whole life before God, how I repented of sin, wanted to trust him as Savior, wanted to follow him. We had a Bible study the next week. I remember we were running sprints, and Stephen's like, hey, man, we're going to have a Bible study. I was like, wow, I need to get one of those Bibles. And he's like, we're going to study the prodigal son. I'm like, who's that? I had no clue. I had no idea about anything in the Bible. He began to disciple me, and then they had the crazy idea of making me the campus outreach leader, and I got fired because I was a little too aggressive. And then as a junior in college, there was a guy named Jim Shaddix came to preach in chapel like this, and he did what I later discovered was called expository preaching, where he actually taught the Bible. I was like, that's what I want to do. And I was in Kentucky. This school was in New Orleans. I had a real problem. I didn't have any money, but I did have one friend in New Orleans, and I said, hey, I would love to come to your school. Can you, I called my friend Matt, who was my friend. I said, can you hook a brother up? And so he calls me back about 2 or 3 days later, and he tells me that these finances are going to come from the president. There's a presidential scholarship. And I was like, hey, man, while I'm at it, I don't have a car either. It's got like 180,000 miles on it. It will never get to New Orleans. Can you hook a brother up? And he said, yeah, we've already talked about that. We have a spare car and an extra bedroom on campus. You can have it. He didn't tell me the bedroom was pink with little bunny rabbits and hats. They were preparing for a girl, but nevertheless, I went into this room, and this is where my life began to change. And so I went to seminary. I sold my car. I packed a trunk. I flew down to this strange place to study theology. And I said, Lord, I'll do anything but be a pastor. I'll be a college minister, a youth minister. I don't want to be a pastor. And about 5 years later, I was pastoring a church, and now we're in Mississippi. I met my wife during this seminary process. And this past summer, we went to Ukraine to adopt children. We were approved to adopt 2 children, and we came back with 4 children. And so you know how to pray for us. We have 4 crazy children now. And my journey has really taught me 2 things. One, the Christian life is very hard. The Christian life is difficult. It's about perseverance. And the other thing that I've learned about the Christian life is it's really about a long obedience in the same direction. This is a phrase from Eugene Peterson, who's written a book called A Long Obedience in the Same Direction. Your Christian life is not about warm, fuzzy feelings and pep rally worship services. It's about consistency. It's about persevering to the end. In fact, the Christian life can be summarized by perseverance. And to be honest with you, the statistics that I read are quite staggering when you think about how many people are not finishing the race. And Paul, in this epistle of 2 Timothy in chapter 4, he compares the Christian life to just that. It's a race. And many begin to get a good start at this race, but sadly, many fall out of the race. One of the statistics I read recently from Focus on the Family reported that 1,500 ministers leave the ministry every month. Not all of them for moral reasons, but for whatever the reason, they're not finishing. 5 years after seminary graduation, only half will still be in the ministry. Other statistics report that upwards of 88% of high school students, once they go to college, are no longer in a local church. They start well, but they don't finish.